I live in a quiet, semi-rural neighborhood where every property has at least 2 acres of land. My house sits at the edge of the subdivision, with a long gravel driveway and a tall iron gate that separates me from the rest of the world. I bought this property for privacy, peace, and the ability to shut out the drama that comes with living near other people. Unfortunately, that peace is often disturbed by the homeowners association. What started years ago as a simple organization meant to maintain the private road has transformed into a controlling group that meddles in every little detail of our lives. The worst part of the HOA isn't the rules, though. It's the president, a woman everyone calls Karen. She's the definition of entitled, with her clipboards, her constant notes about violations, and her belief that she owns the entire neighborhood. For months, I managed to avoid her, keeping my gate locked and my distance. But one morning, Karen decided to push her power too far, and it turned into one of the wildest experiences of my life. It was a Friday morning when I heard a noise that didn't belong. I was sitting on my porch with coffee in hand when the sound of a massive engine echoed down the road. At first, I thought it was construction equipment, but as it got closer, I realized it was something much bigger. Down my driveway came an 18-wheeler semi-truck, the kind you see hauling freight across the country. I nearly spit out my coffee in shock. What business did a semi have on my land? The driver parked casually in my yard, hopped down from the cab, and walked toward me. He asked if I was the property owner, and when I confirmed, he smiled and said he had a delivery. According to him, the HOA president had arranged for a shipping container to be dropped on my property for community storage. I froze, not believing my ears. Why would the HOA put a container here? The driver showed me the paperwork, and sure enough, the delivery order listed my address. But the signature wasn't mine. It was Karen's. Before I could argue further, Karen herself appeared in her shiny black SUV. She rolled down her window with a satisfied grin. She said the container was for the holiday decorations, and my land was the most convenient spot to keep it for the season. I told her absolutely not, but she brushed me off. According to her, the HOA had voted, and as president, she had authority to place it here. She promised it would only be temporary, just a few months, and said I was obligated to cooperate since I was part of the community. The nerve of this woman was unreal. But instead of fighting right then, I smiled and told her fine. She could leave it. She smirked like she had won, and the driver unloaded the giant container in my yard. Both of them left, thinking I'd been forced into submission. But the moment they were gone, I walked down to my gate, swung it shut, and locked it tight. That semi and container were now trapped on my land, and they weren't going anywhere. Hours later, Karen returned, this time furious. She marched up to my gate, shouting that I had no right to keep the HOA's property locked inside. Calmly, I told her that since it was on my land without permission, it was now under my control. If she wanted it back, the HOA would need to pay me storage fees, $200 a day until it was removed. She nearly exploded. She accused me of extortion, screamed that I couldn't do this, and threatened to call the police. I told her to go ahead. When the officers arrived, she waved her papers around, shouting that she was the HOA president and had authority. The officers listened, then turned to me. I explained that the delivery was unauthorized, that the signature wasn't mine, and that this was private property. The officers agreed with me. They told Karen she had no legal right to dump anything on my land, and the contract she signed was invalid since she wasn't the owner. The officers even warned her that it could be considered trespassing. Karen was livid, but the law was clear. For the next 3 weeks, the container stayed put behind my locked gate. Every day I added another $200 to the bill. Word spread through the neighborhood quickly. My neighbors laughed about it, whispering that Karen's power trip had backfired. They drove by and saw the massive container stuck on my property and congratulated me for standing up to her. For once, the whole community seemed to enjoy watching Karen lose. Karen, meanwhile, descended into chaos. She sent me angry emails at all hours, stuffed letters in my mailbox, and tried issuing fake violation notices accusing me of storing commercial equipment. The hypocrisy was hilarious since she was the one who placed it there, but the best part came when my security cameras caught her sneaking onto my property at night with bolt cutters. She was trying to break the lock on my gate. I sent the footage to the police and the HOA board. That stunt earned her a trespassing citation and a fine, and even the other board members were embarrassed by her behavior. Finally, the HOA had no choice but to settle. They scheduled a meeting, and the board agreed to my terms. They would pay me $3,000 in storage fees, remove the container immediately at their own expense, and sign a written agreement that HOA property would never again be stored on a member S land without written permission. Karen herself had to sign the agreement, her face twisted with rage. The day the semi returned to haul the container away was one of the most satisfying days of my life. I stood by the gate, arms crossed, watching as they hitched the trailer and dragged it off my property. Neighbors waved and smiled as they drove past, some even stopping to thank me for standing up to Karen. She didn't show her face that day, too humiliated to watch her defeat. Not long after, Karen resigned as HOA president. Officially, she claimed it was for personal reasons, but everyone knew the truth. She had been humiliated, exposed as powerless when someone finally stood up to her. Without her constant presence, the neighborhood actually became more peaceful. The HOA went back to focusing on the road and basic maintenance, and for the first time in years, people weren't afraid to speak up. As for me, I gained a reputation as the man who locked up the HOA semi and refused to back down. People joked that my gate was stronger than the HOA itself. I just smiled, knowing that all I did was stand my ground and refuse to let someone else's entitlement take away my rights. Every time I walk past that gate now, I remember the look on Karen's face when the police told her she had no power. I remember the neighbors laughing, the board backing down, and the sweet sound of that semi finally leaving my property. It proved a simple truth. When you own your land, no one, not even an HOA Karen with a clipboard, can control you. Sometimes the best revenge isn't yelling or fighting. It's just shutting the gate, locking it tight, and letting entitlement trap itself. And that's exactly what I did.